Coming up this week.
To anybody out there racing or any manufacturers out there, do you want to play catch up or do you want to lead? If you're going to do something, be on the leading edge, not the trailing edge.
Well, hello, friends, and welcome to episode 189 of the EV Resource Podcast. I'm Zach Hurst, and each week I bring you the latest EV news, information, and interviews with industry experts. This week, we are going to talk about the response to EVs essentially dominating in many areas of motorsport. My guest is Jon Bickford. He, with his Model 3 performance, he has 4 championships in 3 series in 4 years. He's the first EV to win a championship in the Good Guys Autocross series, the first EV to win in the National Muscle Car series, and a whole lot more that I'll let him, we'll get to all of the amazing things that Jon has done. But Jon, I want to thank you for joining me on the podcast. Honestly, when addressing, just letting people know what's going on in motorsport, especially related to electric vehicles, there are only maybe 10, not even 10 people that I can think of that would be on my list that I would want to talk to. And so I want to really thank you for joining me, because we're going to get into it today for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me, man. I've been a fan for quite a few years now and enjoy all the work you've been doing. So it's great to be here.
Before we get into everything, I'd love to give people a chance to just give somewhat of their origin story. I'm assuming that you've got some motorsport experience before you bought your car in 2020.
Grew up, all I ever wanted to do was be a race car driver, but, it doesn't work for you if you're not from a wealthy family and all. So
right.
Did some karting as a teenager, and lifelong interest, and read every book on the subject, and kind of sometime in my teenage years figured out I wasn't rich enough to do it as a career, so I needed to go do something else with my life so that I could afford to do it when I'm middle-aged, So,
sure.
Then you come around later in life and really dig into it deep and get really heavily involved when you've got the time and sometimes the money to do so.
Right. And that's one area where I imagine having a Model 3 is saving you a lot of money to enable you to be very active in motorsport at this point, because it's not going to break as much. I mean, I'm sure, and I think I saw a Facebook post that you had that you mentioned, like, the maintenance basically that you've done over the course of the last 4 years or so.
Yeah, I mean, virtually nothing, and in addition to that, any car that's quick enough to hang with me in an autocross course that's gas powered, guaranteed they came on a trailer. It's not something you can drive that's streetable. I put my tires in the back seat and I drive it from San Diego to Oregon and back, and beat a field of 99 cars and trailers. It's the reliability has been ridiculous, honestly. Any other car you could buy, every light on the dashboard would have been lit up 2 years ago, But this thing, I just keep beating on it. And, I think it's maybe lost a little bit on the top end from just abusing the battery. I've done everything wrong to the car. It's been charged to 100% a couple hundred times at least, every year SEMA, it gets charged to 100% on Monday morning and sits in impound until Wednesday before I can drive it. And, I show up in my driveway at 0% sometimes. I've done everything wrong to the car. And so, inevitably, I think it's lost a little bit. But at autocross speeds, it hasn't lost anything. It's like hell. And it has been now in the 5th season of racing this car. And, I can't complain. At the track, sometimes a lot of my friends with gas cars tease me because I got to leave and go charge, but it's like, my hands are clean all weekend long. The only thing I'm touching on the car is the tires, and so you can rely on it. And, there's quite a few of us now running Teslas in the Optima series, and have been since John Laughlin started back in probably 2019. And something they've pointed out is that every Tesla that's ever entered one of those weekends has finished the event. And you cannot say that for any other car, because you're running time trials on the road course, you're running autocross, you're running speed stop, you have to do a road rally. everybody in that series breaks at some point. But us Tesla guys, as long as we can find a place to plug in, we just keep going and we finish every event, and it's pretty amazing.
I think that highlights something that is exceptionally important to mention for the accessibility to motorsport, making it easier and less expensive for people probably like you or me that want to get out there more. But
yeah,
the traditional alternative has been quite expensive, even at the lower tiers. Like,
yeah,
for the future of motorsport to appeal to a wider audience and to be accessible to more people, I think EVs play a very significant role in that.
I think in terms of maintenance, obviously that's huge. But also, the main thing that shuts down racetracks around the country is noise complaints.
Mm-hmm.
Places like Laguna Seca, they can only run a few weekends a year now, and that you've got a tremendous amount of valuable real estate and you got to pay for that in a couple weekends,
Yeah.
and that's not sustainable. And that's, right now, outside of autocross you can still do locally, and that's why I do so much more of that than anything else.
Sure.
But for me to do a time trials anywhere, I'm packing a suitcase and I'm staying in a motel, and that's just all there to it, and now everything gets way more expensive for the weekend. But with EVs, a lot of people, old timers, think, oh, it's the death of motorsport. I think it's the only thing that can save it. You have the reliability factor, you have the potential to make auto racing not much noisier than a football game. Mm-hmm. And every city welcomes football, but you also have the potential to kind of rethink tracks and layouts, and you look at what Formula E did. Now they're getting into more traditional road courses, but they did very short, compact street courses to bring it into the cities.
Yep.
And what do EVs do best? They accelerate out of slow corners better than anything.
Yes.
Now, if you go to Road America, and I took my Tesla Model 3, I'd be sitting on those straightaways for quite a while, but that's 4.5 miles of real estate.
Right.
That you can't build stuff like that anymore. I mean, that, unless you won the Powerball or something, I've bought tickets. I want to build a track. I'm going to keep buying Powerball tickets till I build a track out here. But in the meantime, EVs give the potential to build a track at the football stadium, and have a volume level that's acceptable to the community and really bring back people being able to race in their own town and invite their friends out on a Friday night or a Saturday night, because right now it's like I said, everybody has to pack up a trailer. I don't even have a trailer, but travel hours and hours out of the city, stay in a terrible motel for way too much money, carry a ton of stuff with them because they're basically camping out that week, and that, most of the people I grew up with don't even have off-street parking, where are you going to put a race trailer, and so having a vehicle that I can drive to the grocery store or drive to Oregon and go win a race and drive it back, that's amazing. That's the classic dream from like the 50s and 60s, and nobody's been able to do that kind of thing since.
Yep.
Because any gas car that can hang with mine, one, I can't afford it. And like I said, too, if I did have one, I'd need a trailer. I'd need a truck to pull that trailer. I'd need a place to park that truck and trailer. I'd need a small, mechanic shop in that trailer to keep it running. And it's just not, I kind of thought when Good Guys banned me this year, I really enjoyed the series. And I love a huge variety of cars. I would love to build a 1969 Dodge Dart for Autocross.
Sure.
That's just a car I've always loved. The cost of building it would be more than what I've got in my Tesla, but the cost of maintaining it and campaigning it would be completely unattainable.
Right.
I can barely afford what I'm doing most of the time, but sure. Every penny I get goes to tire rack. So,
You mentioned what we want to talk about today. So let's not hold off any longer, and we'll bring the audience into the real meat of the conversation. What has been happening in motorsport in response to EVs? And I mean, because before we answer that, what we've just said is EVs will save the future of motorsport. You can run them in urban or suburban areas basically without concern. You don't have that noise. It's less expensive, so it makes it more accessible to people that might not have otherwise even had a chance without getting sponsors.
Right.
All of these really good things, but the industry isn't being exceptionally responsive to what really we're identifying as something that is quite positive. So what's
Right.
going on?
Well, let's see. Since December, I went out to the Hot Rod Power Tour West to go win their autocross in Vegas. Woke up at 4 in the morning, drove out there, walked the track, got there, and then we got to talk. And that morning, I guess the sponsors got together and decided an EV couldn't win it. So the Hot Rod Power Tour. So they banned me from competition, but they let me run some exhibition laps. I did gap the field by 0.626, I think, which is a pretty big number in autocross.
Yeah. Yeah. More than half a second.
Yeah. And went home angry. And then since then, I won the national championship with good guys last year.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't mean to have as good a season as I did. It just kind of worked out that way. It ended up, winning 5 out of 5, having fastest time of the day 5 out of 5 times. It just
total domination.
Yeah. And one of the reasons I went out and did that was that other EVs had won in that series individual events.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes they would just kind of forget to mention them in their magazine, of the event coverage and whatnot. And I just kind of thought, well, I'm just going to be so damn dominant that I can't be ignored. And I kind of into the season thinking, well, probably going to get banned after this year, but I'm going to make a mark, and it worked out like that. I think, it was interesting because that's such a different crowd. That's a hot rod, enormous hot rod shows with thousands of people in attendance, and then the autocross is a little sideshow,
Yeah.
But it's great. You get hundreds of people in the bleachers cheering, and it's, there's not a lot of places where you can do amateur racing in front of people. And that, I guess I'm a ham. I love doing that. But also I'm out there pushing my agenda about electric cars. So you need an audience to do that,
Yep.
And it was always interesting because the first events I did with them, you'd have a lot of people kind of smirking as they walk by in the paddock and saying things under their breath and all. And towards the end, you'd still get that. But if they were paying any attention, they'd go see me gap Corvettes by seconds, over and over again all day long. And, I have been in love with motorsport my whole life. And to me, it's like, it's the numbers that matter. The only opinion at a racetrack that's relevant is timing and scoring, and us Tesla guys have gotten pretty good at that, So the response kind of grew better and better. And I'd see people at the same event the following year and you remember me from last year, and people did start getting pretty interested. And I would joke with the guys that run it, it's like, you need a bad guy Mexican wrestler, and I don't mind being that guy. I'm happy with it. That's the most entertaining guy there, So I kind of started to view that as my place in the series, and it was joy, and I felt pretty welcome there. And I'd been there enough, and I scored a ton of points, significantly more points than anybody else in any single class, and more or less swept the season. At the season finale, their big shootout, there ended up being 5 Teslas that showed up that day, whereas usually it was just like Ian and one other, and they do their final 8 bracket shootout, to settle the event. And all 5 of us got into the final 8, and we finished 1, 2, 3, And I think that was maybe the last straw for them, to a certain degree, to have us kind of just sweep a podium in a class,
Sure.
But everybody was still encouraging, took home my trophies. Everybody was excited. A lot of people cheering. They seemed happy about it. And so I made all my travel plans for this season. And I should have just finished a round of 3 of their events in a row. But a few weeks before the season started, they just kind of quietly added electric vehicles are not allowed in the series, to it. And it's a problem because I won free entries for the whole season, among other things. And now I can't use them. So there's a financial value to that, and racing's expensive. You put a lot of money into it, and you try to be successful to take some of that cost back. Nobody in the history of the world's turning a profit in this kind of racing,
right?
But if you can get your hotel covered every now and again, you're like, oh man, thanks. So that it was a shame to end it bitterly with those guys because I really enjoyed running with them. I really enjoyed the audiences with them. And I feel like the crowd were kind of enjoying me at that point. You go out there when you kind of know you've got the upper hand, you can drive a little more sideways and a little big yaw angle all the way around the track and put on a show for everybody. And they enjoyed it. I enjoyed doing that. I wish I could have defended my championship this year, but I guess I have more spare time now. So, And then I thought, well, okay, Good Guys is out, Hot Rod's out. I want to do this event in Pennsylvania called King of the Mountain.
Yeah.
Which is the biggest payday in autocross. And quite a few Teslas have ran there. None have ever won the event, but they've done okay. And I thought, well, this is a year I'm going to go ahead and do that. And the week before King of the Mountain was Optima Series at Summit Point. And I thought, well, I'm just going to agitate. I'm going to sign up for that and then see what Summit Point says about the Tesla that signed up to race with Optima on their track. See if they get banned so I can, But, they announced the invites for King of the Mountain and I couldn't find my name. And I saw a lot of people that, I've beat the majority of people on this list that I've ever encountered. I've beat, and sure enough, they added a little line to the rule book saying no electric cars at King of the Mountain anymore. So that was another real big one I was hoping to do this year. Other smaller clubs have been adjusting rules or bumping us up to, racing against race cars on slicks, basically classes, and just, and it's a shame. We do get a good crowd response. And, with Good Guys, for years, they would allow passengers. Last year, they didn't, but this year they have them back. And I can guarantee you, if I was there, I would have the longest line of people waiting to be passengers because at SCCA practice days, it's like a Disneyland ride. Every run, somebody's, can I get in the back seat? Because everybody wants to try the new thing. They see it's fast, but it's also such a different experience, that I get guys with like a friend of mine with a 800 and something horsepower Mustang. He hops in the passenger seat and everybody says the same thing when you leave the line. Well, every time, because the way these cars hit is so different from anything else, that I wish we were allowed more opportunities to show this off. I kind of did what I could for as long as I could, but at this point, the only sort of high profile series left is Optima Ultimate Streetcar. And I'm planning on doing 3 events with them this year. And, they've got the biggest TV coverage. They've got the best online coverage. And they have a very different attitude because they look at it as getting people to tune in. What's got the most hits when they post videos online, et cetera. And for instance, they did a video after the Thunder Hill event. I wasn't there, but Jordan Priestley and his Utah gang of Teslas were there. And they did a video of them versus the reigning Ultimate Streetcar GTR, which we're all really close rivals with. And I mean, the this versus that nature of it got huge engagement numbers. And last year, every time Optima Ultimate Streetcar would make a post about EVs, it's more negative than positive, but any press is good press. Every time they would mention us, they'd mention a new Corvette or a GTR or something, and they'd get a decent engagement. But as soon as they said something about an EV, people's heads would just explode, and they'd have thousands of comments on the thing, and it would become a big flame war. that's good from the perspective of getting, building your channel and building a following for your series. So Optima understands that, and they're very supportive of us for the most part. But everywhere else, I guess we're just not that wanted anymore, so, which is too bad.
You mentioned a little bit about the reaction of audience that may be there at various events. Probably mixed, but a lot of support. Certainly a lot of engagement online when EVs are involved, which, as you've said, is very good. What's been the reaction of other drivers and other teams? Have they been mixed reactions as well, or have they been largely supportive and respectful of the skill and the vehicle accomplishing what really they can't?
Yeah, very mixed, very mixed. The people who are really good tend to be respectful, and the kind of mediocre people tend to talk a lot of smack.
I mean, that's racing.
So, yeah. So definitely it's taken, with good guys, and also with Optima, it took a few events for like the top guys to kind of start being like, wow, that's somebody we need to be looking out for. And that guy's, paying his dues and earning his winnings, and it did take a couple events to kind of get that treatment, but I don't know that it would be different with a lot of other cars either,
Sure.
But definitely, I mean, I've had, I remember last year, the first good guys event of the season out in Scottsdale, during the drivers meeting, somebody mentioned the Teslans. This one woman says, "Oh, we're going to be pushing that pile of crap off the track in a pile of flames," and I'm thinking to myself, in the previous season, I had seen 5 cars catch on fire at events, and 4 of them were General Motors V8s, and you're driving one of those ladies. So maybe, if we get into the actual odds here, there's a vastly, vastly more likely that you're catching on fire.
Right.
And you get that attitude. And then you get a lot of people coming up, the hamburger line about, or microwave a steak, and I just think,
yes.
I'm not eating the car. I'm racing the car, and the purpose of going to a race is to be fast.
That's a really good answer to that.
And it's so crazy because I think about, when I was a teenager in auto shop and I was into muscle cars back then, and you'd have the Ford guys, the Chevy guys. I was a Mopar guy. Just the imports were just kind of catching on at that point,
Mm-hmm.
And we all respected numbers. We already all respected quarter-mile times, trap speeds, regardless of what you drove. You'd have to shake your head and shake your friend's Mustang hand, every now and again. If they were quicker, they were quicker,
Yeah.
And I never, ever recall back then anybody talking about their feelings. I mean, we were all kind of people who spent a couple hours every morning in high school auto shop because we didn't want to deal with feelings. We were kind of the opposite crowd of that. And now we've gotten to this place where a lot of people that are really into gas cars are making it about their feelings now, and it's such a bizarre phenomenon to me. And the microwaving a steak thing would be an example of that. It's like, what the hell are you talking about? I mean, it's ridiculous, And with the guys I went to high school with, if somebody told them that their slower car was better because of their feelings, we would have laughed at them for the rest of the semester. And then 20 years later at the high school reunion, one of us would have brought that up.
Yep.
It's so insane to me that now, the hardcore car guys' last refuge is to talk about their feelings, basically. But is what it is.
There seems to be a missing piece of the puzzle that maybe you have a little bit more insight than I do. I don't get it, where I don't know if it's just an extreme like polarization of just how society has gotten in general now, or if it's tribalism, or what it is exactly. And I mean, for EVs across the board, but specifically in motorsport, where the point is to go fast and have
Right.
fun. And I don't care who you are, if you're in charge of a race team anywhere in the world, if you can reduce costs so that you're not spending as much money, but then you also have something where you're going to have a very high engagement that is
Yeah.
attracting viewers, which translates directly to sponsorship money. Why do you? I mean, I know it might be speculative. Certainly for me, it would be, because I don't have conversations with people at these race series. Why are they saying no?
You know, I ran the first 3 Holly High Voltage events,
Yeah.
which were the first 2 were spectacular. The third one was kind of hokey, but I won the hokey one. But I was talking with those guys a good bit last year after the event, and for them, it's like for Holly, they early on in 2021 at the first event, they held panels with they'd invite a bunch of guests to go talk about, what we wanted from the aftermarket in
Yeah.
electric motorsport. They were really digging in and involved, and it was really exciting for a company as enormous as Holly, which also owns dozens of other brands.
Well,
A
AEM
carburetor,
EV is, I believe,
AEMEV,
one of their
yeah,
brands.
and that was really when they were kind of launching that brand when they
Mm-hmm.
started it, and they were really enthusiastic about it. And the first year was a huge event. The second year was a little smaller. The third year was kind of hokey. Um, and talking to them, it was interesting because on one hand, they want to get a foothold with this new generation of car people. Because I mean, I find with Tesla owners, there's a combination of people who've always loved cars like myself and like yourself.
Yep.
Um, and this is the new awesome thing, and we're excited to embrace it. And then there's a lot of other people who, have never really had a fast car. The car they traded in was a Prius, but they're into tech and got this amazing car, and now they're kind of getting drawn into the idea of
Yeah.
car motorsports. And they really were trying to get a foothold with those people, and it seemed like it was working. But after talking to them last summer, now they're saying they really can't promote their involvement with EVs very much, and they have to be very selective with who they send their algorithms to, or however that works,
Yeah.
because they're scared to death of what they call the Bud Light effect.
Sure.
And it's a shame because, I mean, like I said, when I was growing up, you might like Fords, you might like Chevys, you might like imports, but you respected each other for the most. You talk some smack, but you respected each other. But this, as you mentioned, just the whole direction our society has gone at this point, and people trying to make it politics. I have people yelling at me about Joe Biden. I'm like, I bought my car in 2019. I don't think he'd even announced his candidacy when I put in the order. I drove
Right.
one 3 blocks. My brain exploded after 3 blocks. I decided this car could compete in any event that'll allow it to run. It can run up front. So I went back and I bought one, and I went home and I refinanced my house and put solar panels on the roof so that I could afford it. And ever since, keep running. And it was never I mean, I guess there was some degree of political thing, but it wasn't a Democrat, Republican, right, left thing. It was, I care about the environment. Yeah. But also I care about being really, really fast on a budget I can afford,
Yeah.
and like I said, I would build a 440 Dart right now if I could afford to campaign it, but I can't,
Yep.
So,
For
so
me, it's the
yeah,
Mark IV Supra.
there you go. Nice.
I absolutely love where this conversation is going. We're going to take a quick break, and then we'll be right back at it.
Do you own a business and want to reach EV owners and people interested in electric vehicles? EV Resource is welcoming businesses nationwide, both big and small, to become advertising partners with us across all platforms. For more information, please email Zach at hello@ev-resource.com.
we've highlighted the opportunity. We've highlighted the problem currently, and
Mhm.
and really, I think we agree, and probably most of the audience of this podcast would agree that it's ridiculous. And let's get to the solution, right?
Mhm.
If the series, to use your reference of the Bud Light effect, and for those that don't know, Bud Light put a rainbow on their can and lost sales like a lot because people are bigots and closed-minded.
Yeah.
But if the future of motorsport is uncertain, this is a way to continue it. And certainly the way any technology has been introduced into motorsport as research and development and ultimate improvement. And I would put EVs as the next step of evolution in improving transportation as a whole, motorsport
Absolutely.
being a huge, important piece of that. How do we go ahead and keep motorsport alive for electric vehicles?
Well, there's an old saying, I waited for somebody to do something about it, then I realized I was somebody. So somebody's got to realize they're somebody and take it on themselves. I think, I love racing against supercars and big V8s and wild builds, but probably it's about time to start looking into a largely electric race series, and there could be some real potential to get advantages with that because, a lot of the hardest stuff, for instance, with autocross is finding venues that'll let you bring 100 cars to go rip up their asphalt all weekend,
Sure.
And make a ton of noise. But theoretically, I think, if you can go to a college and ask to use their lots and it's, hey, look, it's green, it's electric vehicles, I bet you could open up some new opportunities that aren't available to traditional clubs,
Sure.
and again, you're not going to have the noise issues. At an SCCA event, we have to have a guy with a microphone and a decibel meter. And if you get over a certain threshold, they got to radio it in, and somebody in the pits hands them a bunch of steel wool they got shoved in their muffler to try to quiet,
Yep.
But with your cars, all you're going to hear really is the tires, and that's a football level of noise, I figure, So I think it's about time for us to have our own series. I would rather be racing door to door with every kind of car because variety is the spice of life and it's more exciting that way. But it's probably time. And that would also allow the organizer to take some special precautions in terms of fire safety, or at least be able to address them. Because,
Sure.
It could happen. I don't know of a single person who can name a time when like a Tesla went to a track day and caught on fire. I keep pretty up to it. You do too. Do you know of a time somebody's bursting at Laguna Seca or something?
I have not been aware of any EV catching on fire owned by a private owner, like in the more professional, like international kind of level series. Fires with EVs, it's a game of numbers. It's inevitable that something is going to happen. So to your point, tracks or venues need to be prepared for just in case.
Yeah.
It's like, why do we have airbags and seatbelts in our cars? Well, because something could happen. It doesn't mean that we're planning that it's going to happen. Right. We want to be prepared if it does.
And so much of the fire safety with EVs is just educating the people involved.
Sure.
The odds are small,
right.
Because you look at Tesla Corsa, what Unplugged's put together with that, they'll get 30, maybe 50 vehicles at an event, all running hard. A lot of drivers don't really know what they're doing, so the risk, level can be high, but it's a great beginner series. And, they haven't had any of those types of events, so.
Well, and autocross in many ways is going to have even less risk because you're not going to be having major collisions or going off track and like flipping over multiple times. Like, it's a lot safer. in terms of motorsport as a whole, your speeds
Yeah.
are a lot lower. You're not going, 130 mile an hour plus,
Right.
so
You're not wearing a fire suit. You're not
right.
wearing neck protection. You just helmet, shorts, and a t-shirt, kind of racing. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, in those events, I think it's fantastic. And I also think long out in the future, talking about, amateur race series that you can run at a football stadium and all, you know, I think the days of tracks like Le Mans, Nürburgring, Road America, those are long gone. There's nobody building tracks with mile-long straightaways
Right.
anymore. I mean, new tracks are all Herman Tilke design, and they're kind of cookie cutter, and it's a bunch of second and third gear corners connecting to each other. And so as tracks are getting slower, the risk goes down. And that was part of what Formula E did early on. Was a lot of people said, well, look at how much faster a Formula One car is. It's like, well, look how much looser safety standards are for Formula E. They can build a track in a day on a street course, and they don't need the kind of huge runoff areas. They don't need the huge impact absorption because they're not getting to 200 miles an hour.
Right.
So slow. Part of me loves the idea of the old Le Mans straight, staying flat on the gas to 240 miles an hour.
Yeah. My heart breaks to think that would not be there.
Yeah.
In a way.
It will, but I think at the amateur level, at the local level, we're never going to see tracks like that again. We're going to see these, we have a lot of these sort of country club tracks are what we build now, like the Thermal Club, or I think you guys on the East Coast, a bunch of sort of country club race tracks,
I know the guys over at Thermal.
Yeah, there you go. And for those types of facilities, you're not getting the kind of speed and potential impacts that really are really, really catastrophic. And EVs, like I said, the thing they do best is accelerate.
Yep.
So smaller tracks, like Formula E did, result in lower top speeds, result in lower safety requirements, results in lower cost.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For everybody across the board.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I mean, if you had a EV impact a wall at 240 miles an hour, just like a gas car, it's gonna make a mess.
Yeah.
It's just that's what happens at those speeds. But when you look at racing as a whole, everything's getting kind of more compact. I mean, our best venue in California was I call it California Speedway because I'm old, but Auto Club Raceway out in Fontana. And it's closed now because they tore down the 2-mile speedway and they're building a half-mile short track. And then the other thing that happened in California is once a year now, NASCAR is converting the LA Coliseum, the old Olympic Stadium, to run a really short. And for those big, heavy cars on such a short, it's not the best venue, but you see where they're going, And when I was a little kid, the first racing I became obsessed with was the Mickey Thompson Off-Road Grand Prix. And, back in the late 80s, early 90s, they'd bring in a bunch of dirt. It was basically Supercross with trucks and dune buggy, But the reason that became my favorite was because you could go to Anaheim Stadium, you could go to the LA Coliseum, and you could watch it cheap. You had a good seat. You could see the whole track. It wasn't, if
who's doing that now with EVs? Nitro Cross, Travis Pastrana, and a bunch of other really, really awesome names.
They've got the right direction.
Yep.
And the Sierra guys, they built the Echo, and that's become a feeder series now. And I mean, it's still a little too big and a little too expensive for my blood, but it's going down the right path, And I feel like that's kind of what the future of a race car is going to look like, is that sort of cross kart form,
Yep.
People now, we've got halos and all on open wheel race cars. At that point, just put a cage on it and make it more like a cross kart than a Formula Ford,
I mean, you see what IndyCar did with like the windshield. So motorsport in any capacity is definitely changing with or without EVs, but certainly when you incorporate EVs into it. Normally, when I end a podcast, I ask my guests two questions. What do you drive and what drives you? Honestly, I'm going to skip those because we
Yeah.
already know what you drive. We've been talking about it. And I think in this context, what drives you has been fairly clear through our conversation as well.
Yeah.
So instead of those two questions, I'm going to ask you one question.
All right.
What is your favorite electric motorsport series at the upper echelon, like professional series that you like to watch?
I mean, I guess it would have to be Formula E. I have my issues with Formula, but I've also been watching Formula One my whole darn life, and I've never seen cars three abreast at Monaco until Formula E show.
Yeah.
They're pretty wild in that series, and I think there's a lot of over-regulation, slowing the cars and innovation down in that series. I'd like to see them open up more. So I'll say my favorite electric racing series doesn't exist yet, but it will. And that would be something the equivalent of what Can-Am was in the late 1960s, where you just go nuts. Tell the teams, you can have 130 kilowatt hour battery and you got to go 50 miles. Knock yourself out. You know what I mean? Kind of a thing. So
getting back to the race on Sundays, buy on Mondays kind of mindset.
We need something really open and wild. So Pikes Peak. There, that'll be my answer for something existing. That's where you're seeing things like the ID.R.
Yes.
I know Berkeley Spearling's going to come there next year, I think.
Oh, my gosh. You mean 2025?
I think so, yeah.
I can probably make 25. I couldn't do this year, but
I might join you, yeah.
With enough heads up. Okay, all right.
Yeah, and you've got, a few Teslas, Monster Takuma, he was early on building EVs, and they're competing directly with street cars. So I would say that would be the top for me. And on the lower end, I'm going to say Optima Ultimate Street Car. I mean, those are the biggest events I run. And SEMA is the one time a year where when we're pulling out of our little impound parking spot out to go to grid, you got to part the seas of the crowd. And for the first year, every car link, somebody go, oh, throw a rev. Oh, So this year I took an instrumental Dr. Dre track and would just crank it and bump it. My shirt is like my Jaws shark music. Each time I go out, just driving through that crowd of a few thousand people and they're all filming on their cell phones and all. That's as close as I'm ever going to know to being an IndyCar driver. It is what it is, but SEMA is with Optima Series. That's the place to be right now. For an amateur. So yeah.
Well, Jon, this has been the conversation I expected it to be. Honestly, it's been absolutely a pleasure having you on to highlight really not only some of the challenges and things that might be concerning with the we'll say traditionalists in the motorsports arena, but also to end on a high note and say, look, this isn't the end. It's just really just the tip of the iceberg for the beginning. And I'm really excited not only to see how things go as a whole, but also to follow your progress with whatever you end up being involved with.
Oh, thank you so much. And I mean, it's going to be such an exciting next decade for motorsport. As Chris Harris said a couple years ago, we're going to see the fastest cars we've ever known, and they're all going to be electric. That's just the way it's going to be. And I mean, for my whole life, I was jealous of the boomers that got to grow up in the muscle car era and see, a Hemi Cuda arrive for the first time and all. But the era we're getting into now, and we're just barely starting, and already you look at things like the Plaid or the Sapphire or the Taycan GT. The next 10 years is going to make the muscle car era look so quaint, and to anybody out there racing or any manufacturers out there, do you want to play catch up or do you want to lead? Because for me, it was like getting into this. It was like, I could spend a decade trying to be as good as everybody else in a gas car and, really become a master mechanic. And by the time I got to that level, the skill set would be useless, because you're going to be faster.
Yeah.
So, if you're going to do something, be on the leading edge, not the trailing edge, and that's what this next decade is about. And in my little tiny, quaint corner of the world, I'm so happy and also proud, really, to be able to accomplish so many things in such a short period of time. That window's not going to exist. The big money guys are going to show up and they're going to bury guys like, but they're not here yet, so I'm having a blast.
There you go. Well, Jon, it's an absolute pleasure. I want to thank you for joining me on the podcast, and let's keep it rolling.
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime, Zach. I had a blast.
If you've enjoyed this podcast and would like to hear more, please subscribe to wherever you like to watch or listen to your favorite podcasts. And if you're looking to stay plugged into the EV community, head over to ev-resource.com for the very best educational resources, community connections, EV reviews, and a whole lot more. The EV Resource Podcast is a production of EV Resource and is supported by viewers and listeners just like you. Members of the EV Resource Patreon family are, at the Director tier, Rajeev, Narayan, and Andy Cooper. At the Executive Producer tier, Christopher Lawrence. If you're interested in ad-free episodes of the podcast, EV Resource merchandise, support recognition, and more, head over to patreon.com/EVResource. If you have any feedback, please email hello@ev-resource.com and put podcast feedback in the subject line. I've been your host, Zach Hurst. Thank you so much for watching and listening, and we'll catch you next time.